You have been taught to wholesale entirely wrong. How many of us have had deals blow up on our face in the last minute? And if you haven't yet, I promise you will if you don't listen to what I have to say today. When you wholesale properties, everybody loves to count your pockets. Everybody, the buyers, the sellers, the title company, everybody's worried about what you're making as a wholesaler, not how much they're making with you presenting them a good opportunity, which has never made sense to me. They're always counting your pockets. But if you use the strategy that I'm gonna talk to you about today, you'll never have to worry about anybody counting your pockets ever again. Austin Rutherford here, where we talk business, finance, and real estate. Wholesaling is one of the easiest ways to make money in real estate because there's no credit checks, there's no background checks, you don't need money to do it. It requires no education. It's literally the equalizer of everything in real estate, and everybody's trying to do it. And it works. I've been doing it for years, and I've made multiple 7 figures simply just wholesaling houses. It's a beautiful strategy to use. But the problem is when you get to closing, everybody's worried about how much money you make. I've had deals blow up on me a lot at the closing table. We just did one recently where we assigned it to somebody for a $17,000 assignment fee. And it was a buyer that we've sold a lot of things to, so we didn't think we were gonna have an issue with it. Then they came back once they found out we were gonna make 17 grand, and they're like, yeah, you know, we can only pay 13 grand for it. So they reduced their purchase price based on the money that we were making. Selling it to them, we still would have made more money than any other option. So we continued forward. The day of closing, they looked at the HUD, they saw that we were gonna make $13,000. They called us again and said, hey, unfortunately, we can only pay $5,000 less, so you can only make $8,000. Again, never made sense to me because they're still making the money that they wanna make. So once they tried to renegotiate the price again, we rescinded the contract. We backed out of the deal because they weren't gonna follow through with their side. We bought the property and we're gonna make $30,000 flipping the house now. So I have access to private money. A lot of people don't. So they wouldn't have that option of backing out of the deal and buying a house. They would have to accept a lower commission, a lower assignment fee, which isn't right. So I get asked a lot of times, well, how do I get around people knowing how much money that I'm gonna make? Great question. So I'm gonna explain to you the exact strategies that my team and I use so nobody ever worries about how much money that we're making. Nobody can count our pockets at the end of the day. So there's 2 ways of handling this. The first way is called split HUDs. So what this means is when you go to closing with an assignment with a wholesale, the title company will split the HUD. So they'll have a seller HUD and they'll have a buyer HUD. On the seller HUD, the only numbers that the seller sees is the seller's costs. So they see how much money you're paying for it, if they have to pay any other mortgages off, if they're paying any closing costs, and then how much money they get at the end of the day. On the buyer HUD, they see how much money that they're buying it for, any other fees that they're paying, and your assignment fee. So they will see how much money you're making at the end of the day. The good thing about this is that the seller will not know how much money you're making, because the seller can be upset if you're making $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 on their house without doing any work. That's the good thing. The bad thing is that a buyer may try to count your pockets. They see that you're making a $20,000 assignment fee. The day of closing, they say, hey, unfortunately, I can only pay $10,000 less. And you have to accept it because you don't have any other options. You don't have the money to buy it yourself. You don't have backup buyers. So you have to accept a reduced commission, which is wrong, but it is what it is. Buyers count pockets. It's the world we live in. The other way to do this, and this is 100% surefire, is something called double closing. The difference between wholesaling and double closing is instead of assigning an agreement and just assigning it to the individual, you actually buy the property and sell the property. So you're gonna buy it from the seller and then sell it to your buyer. Doing this, nobody knows the assignment fee because there is no assignment fee. It's a purchase and a sale. There's a couple downfalls with it, and I wouldn't even call it downfalls. I would just call it a couple bumps in the road. So when you do double closing, instead of wholesaling a property where you get a seller to sell you a property at $100,000 and you get a buyer to buy that contract for you for $110,000, and then you make the $10,000 margin, that's an assignment. You make the true margin. When you do a double closing, what you do is you buy it and then you sell it. There's no assignment agreement. So instead of making this $10,000 assignment fee, you'll either have to bring $100,000 to the closing table yourself to buy it, which a lot of people don't have. So you can do something, you can raise money called transactional lending. So this is money from people that specifically fund to investors that are double closing. So they lend this money for 24 hours because you're buying it and selling it immediately. So usually they'll charge about 1% to fund you this deal. So if they're lending $100,000, they'll charge 1%. So you'll have to pay them $1,000 in interest to use their money. The other thing that you'll need to do is you'll need to pay closing costs, because when you buy it, there's costs associated with that. And it's variable based on the price, but it's usually, $500 up to a few $1,000, depending on the overall price of the deal. So let's say it's $1,000 in closing costs. So instead of making a $10,000 assignment fee, you have to pay $1,000 to your transactional lender, $1,000 to the title company. So at the end of the day, double closing this deal, you will only make $8,000. So as you can see, there is a cost associated with transactional lending, and the only way around that cost is either using your own money, so you don't have to raise that money to fund the deal, but you cannot get past the closing costs. The closing costs is what it is. So wholesaling to double closing, you will make less money double closing. Okay, Austin, well, why in the world would I want to make less money? Again, the beauty of this is that nobody can count your pockets. When people get to the closing table and they claim that you're making so much money, quote unquote, for doing no work, quote unquote, you'll realize the power of this, because a lot of times other investors, your cash buyers, don't want you making money. Again, it sounds completely backwards, but I promise you it's a very real thing. So instead of risking a deal blowing up at the closing table and you making nothing, paying an extra $1,000 or $2,000 to actually double close the deal is a good thing at the end of the day, because nobody's in your business and a deal cannot blow up last minute due to how much money you're making. So us personally in my business, we don't double close everything. The way that I use it in my business, anything over a $10,000 assignment, so $10,000 or more in an assignment fee, we double close. We double close because we don't want anybody worrying about how much money we're making at the end of the day. Anything below $10,000, the buyer knows how much money we're making because there's an assignment fee on the HUD, so they know that we're getting paid. The only way around this is if we're selling to a buyer that has bought multiple deals from us, and they specifically have told us many times over that they don't care how much money we make. That is when we might assign a 20, 30, 40K deal, because they don't care how much money that we're making. Me personally, when we buy from wholesalers, I don't ever make them double close. I want them to make money. The more money they make, the more deals they bring me. As long as I'm making the money that I want to make, I'm completely fine paying an assignment fee. I've paid $60,000 assignment fees many times over. Very few people are willing to do that though. So only on very, very rare occasions do we ever assign for more than $10,000. You're gonna have to look at your business and make that decision for yourself. And if there's any question whatsoever, even if a buyer says like, hey, I want you to make as much money as you want to make, but just make sure it's not that much, we're double closing it, no questions asked. We don't want anybody to be counting our pockets. And like I said at the beginning of this video, a lot of people are teaching the wholesaling game wrong because they don't tell you anything about this, and your deal will blow up at the closing table. So make sure you have the ability to double close if necessary. And if you want to know how we wholesale, step by step, how we find deals, evaluate deals, make offers, everything in between, check the link in the description below, because it'll show you step by step how we wholesale houses. As always, thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.